Today we're going to be talking about the humble but very important hiking pole, and not only just why these are super important if you do any sort of hill ascents and descents, but we're going to be looking at 3 budget options, which basically one of them will become my new hiking pole of choice going forward, because I've had quite a disaster with hiking poles recently and I really need something that is going to fit the bill, and one of these is definitely going to do that. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm still constantly shocked when I'm walking around in the hills and up in the mountains at the amount of people that don't use hiking poles, and I can definitely see why you would think that they're not necessary, but to be honest with you, I was one of those people. I used to think that these just were a useless thing and, mainly for older people. Sorry to be rude, but yeah, that's actually what I thought, to be honest. So I have come to change my mind on that, absolutely, and I find these absolutely invaluable, especially when I'm walking in the high mountainous areas and anywhere that I feel like I'm going to need a bit of extra oomph to get me up and down. But in 2017, I hiked up a mountain called Ben Lomond in Queenstown in New Zealand. And that was the real changing of the tides with me with hiking poles, because from that moment on, I had really dodgy knees. I basically hiked up and I had a real burst of energy and I trail ran back down the mountain. And since that day, my knees have never been the same. So since then, I started to think about whether I needed hiking poles. And these were the first hiking poles that I actually started using. So these are made by a brand called Muddy Bear. I don't even know if they make these exact ones anymore, but they basically are aluminium, so not carbon fiber shaft. It's got a cork handle, which I know a lot of people like. I personally prefer a foam handle nowadays, and I'll run you through exactly what the differences are. And then they extend out, so you just twist and pull, and then they extend out like so, and they get up to, I think, a maximum of 135 centimeters, these ones. And for any of you that use a hiking pole tent, about 130 centimeters is the height that you'll need a pole to go to in order to use it to get that maximum sort of height within your tent. So on the whole, these are great. I still really like them. They're absolutely durable. If I needed something that I knew absolutely wasn't going to fail on me, I would continue using these. But the main reason that I wanted to change these is because they are quite tall. Even when they're collapsed, they have quite a long profile here. So when they're tucked into the side pocket on my backpack, it means that basically I end up catching myself on branches as I'm going through like a tunnel of trees and that kind of thing, and it gets really annoying. So I wanted something that would be a lot more low profile and enable me to sort of get through nooks and crannies a little bit easier. So towards the end of last year, I started using these, which are made by Overmont, and these actually are carbon fiber poles. They've got a really good handle on them, like it's so comfortable actually to feel this. But basically the difference between cork handle and foam, the cork should over time mold to your exact grip, whereas these come with a grip sort of like pre-made like that, and they should be able to wick moisture from your hands when you're sweating a little bit easier when you're out on the trail. So I absolutely loved these. I thought they were a really good improvement over the Muddy Bear ones that I was using before in terms of weight, in terms of functionality, but I had an absolute disaster with these. So basically I was actually making a video at the time, but essentially what happened was they snapped, and I didn't actually realize this, but they have a real weak point. So any sort of collapsing poles like these, they are weakened at the junctions where all of these sections meet. So essentially the string that binds these together is too thin. So I'm very, very sorry to anyone who went out and bought these, because I actually recommended these in a video that I made last year, and they just haven't lasted basically. So while they are good poles, they feel good in the hand, they just haven't lasted. So they haven't even lasted me a year before one of them has broken. In fact, I'll show you the broken one right now. So these are all the sections of the broken hiking pole, and you can see, yeah, it's all broken into 5 sections here, which is super annoying. Basically, I tried to fix these. I did everything I could. I spent all in all about 6 hours trying to fix these, and yeah, it was time wasted in the end because I've ended up just getting so frustrated with trying to fix them, trying to tie the two sections back together, and it just isn't working. So I now have to find a new hiking pole. And so this is where we come to the point where we look at these 3 new options. All of them are budget friendly, but one of them has to become my new hiking pole of choice. And to do that, I have come up with a scoring system to decide which one is better than all of the rest. So I've got 4 hiking poles, including my old ones that we're going to be talking you through, and we've got 4 categories that they're going to be scored on. So they're going to be scored from 1 to 4 in terms of value, design and durability, weight and comfortability. And these Overmont ones, they weigh 243 grams and the price of them is £35.88 at the moment of recording this video. So how do they fare on our scoring system? Well, in terms of value, they are the cheapest, so they get a 4 out of 4 on that one. Design and durability, obviously they've broken on me, so they are going to be the lowest scoring in terms of design and durability, so they're going to be a 1. And then weight, they're sort of in the middle, so they get a 2 in terms of weight. And then comfortability, I'm actually going to give these a 4 again, because out of all of them, they have the comfiest handle and they are the nicest to hold in the hand for me personally. So that gives us a grand score for these of 11. So these are at 11, so that's what we've got to beat. So these next ones, these are made by a brand called Underwood, and these actually are super well made. They are a really good hiking pole. Again, they've got a carbon fiber shaft and then a cork handle. So like I said, I'm not a fan of cork handles, but I know some people are, and it's totally personal preference on that one, to be perfectly honest with you. But these Underwood hiking poles weigh 248 grams and they cost £45.99. So how do they fare on our scoring system? So in terms of value, they aren't the cheapest, but they aren't the most expensive, so they get a 2 in terms of value. Design and durability, this is where these come into their own, because they have a very similar design to a lot of other Z-type trekking poles. So that's a trekking pole that folds into several sections like this and makes it a lot smaller than these Muddy Bear ones that I was using before. And the way these are so much better than others is, you probably can't see on the camera, but I'll do a close-up here. And inside the system that keeps everything together is not string this time, which is what failed on me, but wire. So it's metal wire, so there's a very low likelihood that these are going to break. So that is where these are better than all of the other trekking poles that we're going to look at today, because the internal part just really won't break, I don't think. So in terms of durability, these get a 4, so they're the highest scoring one in terms of durability. Weight, these are the heaviest out of the bunch. Obviously, like I said, it's metal going through the middle rather than string, so that makes them slightly heavier than all the others at 248 grams. So they get a 1 in terms of weight. And comfortability, again, it's personal preference, but I personally don't really like the cork, so I'm going to give these a 1, which gives us a grand total for these of 8. So 11 for the first ones, now we're at 8 with these ones. So yeah, not the best score with these. So the next ones that I've got are these Nature Hike ones, and again, they're quite a similar design, so they fold up rather than extend out. So yeah, they've got quite a good design. Again, they're carbon fiber. This time they've got a foam handle, which feels quite nice in the hand, but not as good as those first ones. So these weigh 231 grams. And for a pair of them, they are £51.80, but you have to buy them separately, which is quite annoying. So separately, they are £25.90, but obviously you're going to need 2, most likely, so they are £51.80. And how do they fare on our scoring system? So these, in terms of value, are by far the most expensive. So they get a 1 in terms of value. And then design and durability, again, they've got the string going through the middle. So I know from experience that that probably won't last. So in terms of design and durability, they get a 2. So yeah, not the best. Weight, they get a 3 because they're 231 grams, so fairly light. And then comfort, they also get a 3 because I like the handle, they feel good in the hand. So that gives us a grand total of 9 for these. So yeah, again, not quite as good as those first ones actually. So yeah, I'm still stuck with the old ones for the time being. So now we come to our final hiking pole, and I have hopefully saved the best for last for you guys. And these, I actually couldn't believe how light they were in the spec sheet when I was looking at them online, so I had to try them. And these are made by a brand called OK Healing. And to be honest with you, I thought they might be a little bit gimmicky, a little bit flimsy to get the weight down so low, but they actually are pretty well made, and I'm actually really impressed with these. So the weight of these is 139 grams, so that's like half the weight of a lot of the other ones that we've looked at. So in terms of weight, I can get a pair of these for the same weight as what I was using with these Muddy Bear ones. And in terms of price, yeah, they're not that expensive. So they are £40.99 for a pair. So yeah, they're actually really well priced. So they're made from carbon fiber, and they've got a foam handle. The foam handle is quite tough, I will say that, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing. In the hand, it doesn't have that same sort of squidginess as I was used to with my old hiking poles here, but they definitely feel like they'll be durable in terms of the handle. And the way they're designed in a completely different way to all of the others. So they actually fold down to be quite a bit smaller. And essentially, you, excuse me here, but it's going to be probably a bit noisy and rattly for a second, but yeah, essentially you tighten it from the top here, which is completely different to the way the others extend, and then you basically wrap it all the way around the top like so, and then fasten it in like that, and then now you've got a nice long section. So one of the drawbacks with this style of pole is that they're not adjustable at all, so it means you're stuck with them at the height, at only one height. So if you're really quite a bit shorter than a lot of other people, you might struggle with these, or if likewise if you're really quite tall, they're just set at one height. And again, if you use your hiking poles as your tent poles like I do, so I've got a trekking pole tent that doesn't have any poles, you have to use your hiking poles, it means that you won't have that adjustability of the height. So that is a little bit of a drawback with these. But the beauty of these is that they are just so simple. So like I said, there's this string that goes all the way from the top to the bottom, and I think that although they are made with string, if I need to replace this string at any point, I think I'm going to be able to adjust it with just by using the tools that I have. So that's where I think these come into their own. They're just so user-friendly, and they do feel a little bit flimsier than the others. For example, most hiking poles will have quite a substantial padded strap like these. These ones only have sort of a ribbony strap, which is fine, but probably isn't as good, but it does save on weight. So these actually, in terms of weight and design, look like they're going to be really good. So how do they fare on our scoring system? So in terms of value, they aren't the cheapest, but they're the second cheapest on our list. So they get a 3 out of 4. Design and durability, again, they have a few drawbacks in terms of adjustability and things, but I think that they are going to be so much easier to repair if they do go wrong. So I'm going to give them a 3 again. Then in terms of weight, they are by far the lightest out of all of the hiking poles that we're looking at. So they get a 4 for sure on the weight. And then in terms of comfortability, again, I like the foam handle, but it is a little bit tough on the hand, so I'm going to give them a 2. And that gives us a grand total of 12. So finally, we found a hiking pole that fits the bill and is going to be my new hiking pole of choice. So going forward, this is what I'm going to be using. And in my next video, I will definitely be taking these with me, because the place that I'm going on my next national parks project definitely needs some hiking poles. So if you haven't been watching all of my National Parks Project videos, please do go back and watch them, because there's a whole series. So basically I'm doing hiking, camping and landscape photography in all 15 of them. So yeah, definitely check out all of my previous videos and stay tuned to the channel for the next video where I will be putting these through their paces properly. But I would also like to give an honourable mention to these hiking poles made by Underwood. Obviously they were actually the lowest scoring out of all of them, but I think if you are in the market for a Z-type trekking pole that folds down quite small like this and is fairly lightweight, I think these are the ones to choose if you prioritize durability over everything else. Because of that metal wire going through the center of it rather than string, I think these are a really good option if you're looking for a new trekking pole and you really want to make sure they last as long as possible. Well guys, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and definitely check out the next video where, like I said, I'll be putting these properly through their paces somewhere where I'm definitely going to need them, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Cheers, bye!